How prison gangs recruit and control their members. The rain hammered against the transport van as it rolled through the gates of Blackstone Penitentiary. Detective Mara Allison watched through the fogged window as the towering concrete walls swallowed the vehicle whole. Somewhere inside those walls, buried between decades of silence and tension, something had gone very wrong, and she'd been called to find out why. The moment she stepped out of the van, she felt the shift. Blackstone wasn't like the other facilities she'd visited. It held a quiet that didn't feel empty, it felt observant. As if every crack in the pavement, every barred window, every whisper behind steel doors was waiting for someone to look deeper. A security officer hurried toward her. "Detective Ellison? Warden Carter is expecting you." They passed through a series of thick doors, each one slamming shut behind them with a metallic finality that made her shoulders tighten. When they reached the intake wing, the warden stood waiting beside a small interview room, his expression tight and uneasy. "This morning," he began, "a new inmate arrived. Within an hour, he requested immediate protective custody. Says he was approached by multiple inmates, different groups, different cell blocks, all before he even reached general population." Ellison raised a brow. "Approached for what?" The warden hesitated. "Recruitment." She stepped into the interview room. The man sitting at the table looked too young for the wear on his face, the kind of exhaustion that came from fear, not age. His knee bounced uncontrollably. His hands trembled slightly, even cuffed. "My name is Detective Ellison," she said gently. "I'm here to understand what happened." The inmate swallowed hard. "They were waiting for me." "Who?" "I don't know their names." He shook his head, eyes darting as if the walls themselves were listening. "But they knew mine. Knew where I was from. Knew who I hung out with before I got locked up." Ellison exchanged a glance with the warden. Pre-knowledge meant planning. Coordination. "What did they want?" she asked. He hesitated, then whispered, "They said I needed protection." Another beat. "And that protection comes with expectations." Ellison leaned back. His statement wasn't new. Over the years, multiple investigations had documented recruitment moments like this. But something in his voice, something in the timing, made her uneasy. "3 different groups," the inmate continued. 3 separate people. All asking the same question. "What question?" Ellison asked. He met her eyes, fear hollowing his voice. "Who do you belong to?" Ellison felt a chill climb up her spine. The warden cleared his throat. "Detective, there's more." He placed 3 items on the table, each pulled from separate intake areas. 3 small slips of paper, plain white, creased and worn. Ellison picked up the first. On it was a simple symbol. She opened the second. Another symbol. And the third. A third symbol. Different symbols. Different groups. Same message. They already knew who they wanted. Ellison studied the inmate again. "How did they know you'd be arriving today?" "I didn't tell anyone," he said. "Not even my family. They didn't know the transfer date." The warden nodded grimly. "That's what concerns us." Ellison placed the papers side by side on the table. A pattern began to form, not of meaning but of reach. Someone inside the prison, or beyond it, was coordinating communication that should have been impossible. She turned back to the inmate. "Did any of them threaten you?" He shook his head. "No. That's the part that scared me the most. They said I'd understand soon enough. That everybody chooses a side." His voice cracked. "Detective, I don't want a side." Ellison's jaw tightened. "You did the right thing asking for protection." The interview ended, but the unease lingered in the air. When she and the warden stepped into the hallway, she spoke quietly. "This level of coordination doesn't happen spontaneously." The warden nodded. "I know." "Who else knows he arrived today?" "Just intake officers." "Anyone new on staff?" "A few recruits. But no one with access to inmate history." Ellison tapped the papers against her palm. "Someone does. Someone with enough knowledge to predict who's vulnerable and who's useful." As they entered the central corridor, the overhead lights flickered, once, twice, then steadied. A guard approached quickly. "Warden, detective, you need to see this." It was found in Block D. The guard handed Ellison a folded sheet of paper. She opened it. Inside was a list. Not of names. Not of numbers. But of arrival dates. Dates that hadn't happened yet. Dates of future transfers. Her stomach dropped. "Someone has access," she whispered. "Access to schedules, routes, intake lists." She met the warden's eyes. "And they're preparing." The warden's voice was low. "Preparing for what?" Ellison folded the paper slowly. "For recruitment. For expansion. And maybe for something bigger." She glanced back toward the intake wing. "Because if new inmates are being approached this quickly," she exhaled, "then this isn't random. And it didn't start today." Before the warden could respond, a guard's voice cracked over the radio. "Central to warden, we've got movement in Block C. Multiple inmates gathering in the common area." The warden stiffened. "Is there an altercation?" "No, sir, they're not fighting. They're forming a circle." Ellison felt ice settle into her chest. A gathering wasn't normal. A gathering meant someone had called them. "Detective?" the warden asked, voice trembling. Ellison pocketed the intake schedule list. "We need to get there. Now." The moment Detective Mara Ellison and Warden Carter stepped into Block C, the air shifted, thick, heavy, buzzing with the tension of unspoken rules. Guards stood along the walls, unsure whether to intervene or wait for orders. In the middle of the common area, a silent formation of inmates stood shoulder to shoulder, forming a perfect circle. No shouting. No aggression. Just silence, controlled, deliberate, rehearsed. Ellison scanned the faces one by one. These weren't inmates from a single group. The patches of tattoos, the coded symbols inked across arms and knuckles, they represented different blocks. Groups that normally didn't share space without conflict. Yet here they were, unified. Watching. "Who organized this?" she whispered. Carter swallowed. "That's the problem. No one knows." A guard approached nervously. "Detective, this started 15 minutes ago." They walked out of their cells without a word. No disputes. No signals we could see. They just formed the circle. Ellison stepped forward, keeping her distance. "Any leaders among them?" she asked quietly. The guard nodded. 2 men from the old Brotherhood tier, one known associate of La'im, and a young inmate with documented ties to the Gangster Disciples. 3 groups. 3 territories. 3 histories. Now connected. Something was changing the rules. Something bigger than intimidation or recruitment. Ellison turned to Carter. "We need to know who gave the command." Carter shook his head. "We searched cells this morning. Nothing. No notes, no contraband communication devices, no suspicious activity." "Someone called this," Ellison insisted. "Gangs don't shift overnight. There's a pattern, someone's guiding it." She approached the circle slowly, hands visible. The inmates turned their eyes toward her in unison. Not threatening, acknowledging. Recognizing her presence. At the center of the circle, placed neatly on the floor, was a folded piece of paper. Ellison's pulse quickened. "Permission to retrieve it?" Carter nodded reluctantly. "2 guards with you." She stepped inside. None of the inmates moved. None spoke. None even blinked. She crouched, picked up the paper, and stepped back out. Only when she left did the formation gently break apart, inmates dispersing wordlessly back into the routine of prison life. As if nothing had happened. As if the message had already been delivered. Back in the corridor, Ellison unfolded the paper. 3 symbols. The same 3 from the intake room. The same 3 carved into the wall earlier that morning. But now they were arranged in a triangle, equal points connected by a single line. At the center of the triangle, in small handwritten print, was a phrase. "Influence begins with belonging." The lieutenant frowned. "Detective, what does that mean?" Ellison didn't answer at first. She looked back through the glass, watching the inmates settle into their routines. Nothing in their behavior betrayed the tension they'd carried moments before. It was as if the entire gathering had been a silent demonstration, a reminder of something hidden. She folded the note. Recruitment isn't about fear. It's about giving someone a place to stand. Someone out there understands that, and they're using it. The warden exhaled. You think someone is manipulating recruitment patterns? Not just manipulating, Ellison said. Orchestrating. As they walked toward the operations center, another guard approached, carrying a small cardboard box. Detective Ellison, this was found in the laundry transfer. No inmate claims it. No staff signed off on it. He handed her the box. Inside were dozens of scraps of paper, each containing a date, a symbol, and a block number. Transfer schedules. Housing assignments. Inmate tiers. And they were accurate, not guesses, not rumors. These were internal documents, information only staff should have. Ellison's voice dropped to a whisper. This is someone with access. A guard looked uneasy. Staff member? Not necessarily, Ellison replied. Sometimes access doesn't require being inside the walls. Sometimes it requires someone who knows how these systems work, someone who understands the social fabric inside a prison. She sifted through the scraps. Some contained coded letters. Some had arrows pointing from one name to another. Some listed cell blocks known historically for housing high-ranking members of different gangs. Pattern after pattern emerged. Each one pointed to a calculated push toward organized influence. Carter rubbed his temples. Years ago, we had issues with outside communication. But nothing like this. Not this coordinated. Ellison stopped sorting. Warden, I need to see the employee list. Not current staff, former staff. Anyone who left abruptly. Anyone who had access to transfers, files, or housing assignments. Carter blinked. Detective, there are nearly 2 decades worth of former employees. Start with case managers, she said. Counselors. Intake officers. Anyone who ever worked in inmate classification. The warden nodded slowly. I'll have the files brought to your office. Before they could leave, another alert crackled over the radio. Control to warden, we have movement in Block F. Inmates are gathering again. Ellison turned sharply. Another circle? Negative, the voice replied. They're lining up in rows. Facing the same direction. Toward what? The pause. Toward the hallway, where the new intake is housed. Ellison felt her chest tighten. Recruitment wasn't coming. It had already begun. Within minutes, they stood in Block F, the hum of tension vibrating in the air. Dozens of inmates stood in orderly lines, as if awaiting instruction. The new intake wing lay just beyond the hall. What triggered this? The lieutenant asked. A guard pointed to the far wall. There, written in small, neat handwriting, was a sentence. Belonging creates loyalty. Loyalty creates control. Ellison stared at the words, her mind racing. Someone was teaching. Someone was shaping. Someone was preparing the next step. The warden stepped beside her. Detective, what happens if we don't stop this? Ellison looked at the lines of inmates, silent, united, waiting. We won't have to worry about recruitment, she said softly. We'll have to worry about leadership. The conference room at Blackstone Penitentiary was silent except for the soft clicking of the ceiling fan. Detective Mara Ellison stood over a spread of documents, transfer logs, coded notes, sketches of symbols, employee lists, each page part of a puzzle that had grown darker with every new discovery. Warden Carter entered with a folder in his hand, his expression tight. Detective, I think we found something. He spread the folder open. Inside were files of former staff members. Case managers, counselors, intake officers. But one name had been highlighted, repeatedly. A former classification officer named Daniel Merriweather. Ellison scanned the notes. Why him? Carter exhaled. 3 reasons. He worked in inmate classification for 6 years, which gave him access to transfer schedules, gang associations, and vulnerability assessments. He resigned abruptly 2 years ago. Then, he paused, face tightening. And what? She asked. He left after being investigated for inappropriate contact with multiple inmates. Ellison frowned. Did the investigation conclude? No, Carter said. He left before it finished. She felt something shift in her gut, that quiet moment where instinct aligns with evidence. Where is he now? She asked. Unknown, Carter replied. He moved out of state. No fixed address. Ellison tapped the table, thinking. But if he had access to classification data, and if he built relationships with inmates over the years, he might have built something else. A recruitment pipeline, Carter said quietly. Not just a pipeline, Ellison replied. An ideology. The coded notes, the synchronized formations, the silent demonstrations, none of it felt like the chaotic nature of scattered gangs. It felt structured, planned, guided. Someone wasn't just manipulating recruitment. Someone was teaching control. A guard burst into the room, breathless. Detective, you need to come to Block D. Now. They followed him quickly through the corridors, lights buzzing overhead. When they reached the block, Ellison saw a group of inmates standing in two symmetrical rows facing a single man sitting on the floor. He wasn't older than 40. Dark hair. Unshackled. What happened? Ellison whispered. The lieutenant answered. He requested protective custody, and then walked into Block D on his own. Ellison's pulse quickened. Who is he? Transferred in yesterday, the lieutenant replied. Name's Thomas Merweather. Ellison froze. Merweather? Yeah, the lieutenant said. He's the younger brother of the former officer. Intake notes say he requested no gang affiliation. But look. He pointed to a small tattoo near the man's collarbone, a faint outline of a triangle with 3 points. Her breath caught. The symbols. The notes. The formations. They weren't just fragments. They were lessons. Thomas sat calmly, hands resting on his knees, as inmates watched him in stillness. He looked up slowly, meeting Ellison's gaze with a quiet, unsettling steadiness. She stepped forward. Thomas Merweather? He nodded. Detective Ellison. I've been expecting you. Subscribe for more dark mysteries, true crime documentaries, prison history and real-life suspense stories every week.